The crying started before sunrise and didn't stop when the day grew bright. It filled the halls of the mansion like a restless echo, slipping under doors, clinging to walls, settling into every corner. Two small voices, raw, tired, and aching, rose and fell together as if the twins had learned to breathe their pain in sync. For the man standing at the top of the staircase, it felt like standing before a storm he could neither calm nor escape. Ethan Caldwell had faced collapsing markets, hostile takeovers, and moments when his empire nearly fell apart. None of that frightened him anymore. What frightened him was this: his children's tears, endless and unanswered. Since the night his wife never returned home, the house had lost its warmth. The laughter that once spilled from the kitchen was gone, replaced by a quiet so heavy it pressed against his chest. He had tried everything he knew how to do. New routines, gentle words, gifts he hoped might distract them. But nothing reached the twins where they were hurting. The children cried not loudly but desperately, as if each tear carried a question no one had answered. They cried at breakfast, at bedtime, in the middle of play. Sometimes they cried in silence, tears rolling down their faces while they stared at nothing. Doctors said time would help. Specialists said patience was key. Nannies came and left, one after another, each promising hope and leaving with defeat in their eyes. That morning, as the twins sat curled on the rug, clutching each other and shaking with quiet sobs, Ethan felt something inside him break. He knelt in front of them, his voice unsteady, his hands unsure. "I'm here," he whispered, though he wasn't sure they could hear him anymore. Their cries didn't change. From the doorway a woman watched. She hadn't spoken since arriving weeks ago. She hadn't rushed in with rules or rewards. She simply observed, waiting for the right moment. As the twins' tears grew softer but heavier, she stepped forward, knelt beside them and leaned close. What she whispered next would change everything, though no one in that room yet understood how powerful a single gentle sentence could be. The twins froze the moment the woman's voice reached them. It wasn't loud. It wasn't firm. It didn't demand silence or promise comfort. It sounded like a memory, soft, steady, and familiar in a way that made the air itself feel warmer. Ethan noticed it immediately. The crying didn't stop, but it changed, shifting from sharp sobs to trembling breaths, as if the children were listening even while they hurt. Her name was Lena. She had arrived quietly, recommended by someone who had said only one thing: she understands broken hearts. Ethan hadn't asked for details. He was past believing resumes mattered. Still, he watched closely as Lena stayed kneeling, her presence calm, her eyes level with the twins. She didn't touch them. She didn't rush. She simply stayed. The twins stared at her through tear-filled eyes, their faces streaked and tired. One of them clutched a worn toy, its fabric faded from years of love. The other kept glancing toward the hallway, as if expecting someone who never came anymore. Lena followed their gaze and nodded slightly, as though she understood the question behind it. "You're not wrong for feeling this," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "You didn't imagine the love you lost." Ethan felt his throat tighten. No one had ever said that out loud. Everyone had tried to move the children forward, past the pain, away from the sadness. No one had given the pain permission to exist. The twins' breathing slowed. Their shoulders still shook, but less violently now. Lena continued, choosing each word with care. She spoke about how love doesn't disappear just because someone does. How tears can be messages when words feel too heavy. How missing someone doesn't mean you're broken, it means you remember. The room felt different. The silence no longer pressed, it listened. Ethan remained frozen, afraid to interrupt something fragile and rare. For the first time in years, he wasn't watching his children fall apart. He was watching them hold on to something steady. And in that moment he realized the crying had never been the problem. It was the unspoken grief that had been begging to be heard all along. The next few days unfolded in a way Ethan hadn't dared to imagine. The crying didn't vanish, but it no longer ruled the house. It came in waves now, softer, shorter, as if the twins were slowly learning when to let the tears fall instead of holding them captive inside. Lena didn't try to erase their sadness. Instead, she gave it a place to rest. Every morning, she sat with them near the wide window where sunlight spilled across the floor. She asked simple questions, never pushing, never correcting. Sometimes the twins answered with words. Other times, they answered by drawing, their small hands tracing shapes that spoke louder than sentences ever could. Lena watched each line carefully, recognizing symbols of fear, love, and longing that others might have missed. Ethan observed from a distance. He noticed how Lena never raised her voice, never rushed them toward happiness. When the twins fell quiet, she stayed quiet too. When they spoke about memories, she didn't change the subject. She listened like someone who had once needed the same patience. Slowly, the twins began to follow her lead. They laughed once during a game, surprised by the sound of it. They looked at each other, unsure if it was allowed, then laughed again. One evening, Ethan found Lena in the kitchen after the children had gone to sleep. He finally asked the question he'd been holding back. "How do you know what to say to them?" His voice carried equal parts curiosity and gratitude. Lena paused before answering. "Because I was them," she said gently. She spoke of losing someone she loved young, of nights spent crying quietly so no one would worry. She explained how silence can hurt more than words, and how children don't need fixing, they need understanding. That night, Ethan sat alone in the darkened living room, replaying her words. He realized how often he had hidden his own grief to appear strong. The twins had learned that silence from him. The next morning, when they asked about their mother, he didn't change the topic. He sat down, breathed deeply, and answered. The healing had begun, not with money or solutions, but with honesty that finally had room to breathe. One afternoon, the twins asked a question that stopped Ethan mid-step. They were sitting at the dining table, crayons scattered between them, when one of them looked up and said, "If love stays, why does it hurt so much?" The room went still. Ethan felt the old instinct rise, to distract, to delay, to soften the truth until it lost its shape. But Lena met his eyes and gave a small nod, not of instruction but of trust. He pulled out a chair and sat with them. His voice didn't come easily. He told them that love hurts because it mattered, because it still mattered. He admitted that he felt the ache too, even when he smiled. The twins listened closely, as if they had been waiting for permission to hear those words. Their faces didn't brighten, but something inside them settled, like a knot slowly loosening. Later that day, Lena suggested something unusual. She asked the twins to help her open a door that had remained closed since the night everything changed. Together, they walked down the hallway and stopped in front of the room no one entered anymore. Ethan's hands shook as he unlocked it. Inside, memories waited quietly, soft fabrics, familiar scents, small reminders of a life once shared. The twins hesitated, then stepped forward. Instead of tears, there was curiosity. They touched objects carefully, asked gentle questions, and shared stories Ethan had never heard. Lena guided them to speak not only of loss but of joy, how their mother laughed, what songs she loved, the way she used to tuck them in. The room filled with warmth, not pain. That night, the twins slept without crying for the first time in years. Ethan sat by their beds long after they drifted off, realizing that healing hadn't come from forgetting, but from remembering together. And as he turned off the light, he understood something deeply important. The strongest walls he had built were not protecting them, they were keeping them apart. Change didn't arrive all at once. It moved quietly, like morning light slowly finding its way into a dark room. The twins still had moments when their voices shook, when sadness returned without warning, but those moments no longer felt endless. They knew now that someone would sit with them until the feeling passed. That knowledge alone made the weight easier to carry. Ethan began to change too. He stopped burying himself in work late into the night. Instead, he stayed home listening to stories the twins shared about their day. Sometimes they spoke about their mother, sometimes they didn't. He learned not to steer the conversation, only to follow where their hearts led. For the first time since his loss, he allowed himself to speak honestly about his own feelings. He told them he missed her too. He told them it was okay to feel strong one moment and fragile the next. Lena watched this shift with quiet satisfaction. She never claimed credit. She reminded Ethan that children don't need perfect parents, only present ones. When the twins struggled, Lena taught them small rituals, simple moments to pause, breathe, and remember love without fear. A candle at dusk. A shared drawing. A whispered sentence before sleep meant only for them. One evening, the twins surprised Ethan. They handed him a picture they had drawn together. It showed 4 figures holding hands, standing beneath a wide sky. One figure was drawn with lighter lines, almost transparent, yet still smiling. Ethan felt tears rise, but this time they weren't heavy. They were gentle. The twins leaned into him, not in distress but in closeness. Lena stood nearby, giving them space. In that moment, Ethan understood something that had once felt impossible. Grief had not disappeared, but it had transformed. It no longer controlled their lives. It had become a bridge, connecting love from the past to hope for the future. And hope, once returned, has a way of growing stronger every day. Months later, the house felt alive again. Not loud, not perfect, but warm in a way that reached the heart. Laughter returned in small bursts, unexpected and precious. The twins no longer cried themselves to sleep. Instead, they talked until their eyelids grew heavy, sharing thoughts that once felt too painful to release. The walls that had echoed with sorrow now carried gentle sounds of living. Ethan often reflected on how close he had come to losing more than he already had. He realized that strength wasn't found in silence or control, but in the courage to feel and to listen. The greatest gift he had given his children wasn't wealth or security, it was permission to be honest about their hearts. One quiet evening, as the twins prepared for bed, they asked Lena if she would stay. She smiled and knelt beside them, repeating the same words she had whispered that first morning, simple, steady, filled with understanding. The twins closed their eyes peacefully, holding those words like a promise. Later, Ethan thanked Lena, offering her more than she had ever asked for. She shook her head gently. "You did this," she said. "I just reminded them they weren't alone." Before leaving, she told him something he would never forget. Pain grows in silence, but healing grows in shared truth. Life continued as it always does, with new challenges and uncertain days. But the family now faced them together. The loss that once defined them no longer trapped them. It had reshaped them, softer, stronger, and more connected than before. And whenever the twins felt sadness return, they remembered what the maid had whispered long ago. Love never leaves, it waits to be spoken.